we're going to have Brenda Burger come and give a testimony. Brenda is a friend of our church, and I did not even know it until I saw her this morning. Brenda is a part of the Emmaus community, but she is also a friend of Lori, and she's going to give a testimony on what we are hoping to do with our Wednesday nights when we can get through this Omicron variant and get into a place where we can safely eat together. Some of the things that we're hoping to do, she's going to give a testimony of what happened in her life, and so I'm looking forward to hearing from her. Don't worry, those of you who are dying for a good sermon, I'm still going to be here and I'm going to preach today. But we're also going to hear from Brenda. In case you don't want to hear from me, you'll hear someone else who has good words to say.
Lori asked me if I would just tell a little bit of my story, because I know you are contemplating and looking forward to a new service, as Pastor Sonny just alluded. So let me tell you a little bit about me. This starts in 1996, a couple years ago, and my neighbor across the street used to be the treasurer of First United Methodist Church of Daytona down on Bay Street, Palmetto and Bay. And she came over to the house and one night and said, my husband and I are getting ready to go sailing on a long expedition. And she said they're having trouble at the church finding somebody to take my place doing, treasurer duties. And she says, I know you have a little bit of background in bookkeeping. And she said, I was wondering if you might be interested in that. And I said, because I just always say, okay, sure. So she said, well, let me talk to the pastor tomorrow. And then she called me later that day and said, pastor says that's great. He would like to talk to you first. So if you could come tomorrow at whatever time and meet him and talk to him. And I said, okay. So as soon as I hung the phone up, I will never forget, I was standing in the kitchen and I looked at the wall and I said, wow, I cannot believe this, that I just accepted a position as the treasurer of a church and I've never, ever in my life set foot in a church. What's wrong with me? What did I just do? So the next day, I went to talk to them, went to talk to the pastor, scared to death, of course. I probably said 10 words the whole time. But he was very nice, and the secretary was very nice, and I thought, okay, can do this. So started doing the job there and met the people that worked there. Like I said, the pastor's name was Steve, and the treasurer, or the secretary was Pat, and down the hall, there was an office, a woman in an office, and I'll never forget the title on her name tag said, Minister of Pastoral Care. And for me, I thought, that was so intimidating. I had no idea what that meant. Her name was Beth, and she was very nice too. Everybody was very nice to me. So we all started working together, and I hadn't been there but a few days, and Beth came up to me one day just before I left and said, I'm wondering maybe if you'd like to have lunch together one day. And of course I said, oh, sure, of course, And so we decided to go within the next couple of days. And I remember at that time, I'm like, oh my gosh, you're going to have lunch with this person you don't know, this church person, this person whose title is just intimidating. And I reminded myself, just don't start eating the food when it comes to the table because she's going to want to pray. So I kept remembering that. And we went to lunch and we had a great time. Conversation was easy. We found we had a lot in common. And it just went great, and I was thrilled. And we came back to the church that day, and I had just a couple of things left to do. So I sat down at the computer, and she was sitting behind me. I didn't know she was there until I heard some papers rustle, and I knew that we were the only two people there at that time. And so I'm almost finished doing my job, and she said to me, to the back of my head, she said, Brenda, I don't know if you have a church already, but I'd like to invite you to come to one of our services if you don't. And immediately I felt like, a million spotlights were on me. I'm like, oh, I'm busted now. I had flown under the radar pretty good there, but now I got to own up, And so I turned around and I said to her, I don't have a church. I said, in fact, I've never been inside a church in my life. I said, I've been a little curious, about it. And, my mother has a King James Bible, and I've looked at it a couple times. And she says, hold on just a second. And she goes down the hall and she comes back and she has a Bible with her, and an IV Bible. And she said, here's what I would suggest, start with the Gospels, just start reading. And she said, if you have any questions, come and talk to me anytime. And let's get together maybe once a week and just talk about things. And I said, okay. So I started reading, and, it was very interesting. I was immediately drawn in. And she told me, she says, sometimes, most of the time, she says, I'm the liturgist while Pastor Steve is preaching. And I'm thinking, liturgist, I don't know what that is. And so she told me, she reads the scripture and things like that. And she gave me a little cassette tape because they recorded the sermons. So she gave me this little cassette tape. Remember those antiques? So I listened, in my car. I listened to it, and I thought, okay, kind of getting a vibe for what it's like. I'll get up my courage and go one Sunday. So I asked a friend of mine if she would go with me because there was no way I was going to go by myself. And she says, oh, sure, I love to do stuff like that, visit churches. And I thought, what's wrong with her? I'm scared to death, and she would love to do it. So we went one Sunday, and I remember we sat in the next to the last row all the way in the back because I didn't want anybody to know I was there. So, the pastor service starts, and he asks, is there anybody here for the first time or anybody visiting? If you'd like to stand up and say your name, we'd love to greet you. And a couple people did. And my friend said, are you going to stand? I'm like, no, no way. So a couple people stood up, sat down, and then Pastor Steve said, hey, wait a minute, who's that all the way in the back? I think that's our treasurer, Brenda. And I'm like, oh, golly. So I stood up, hi, everybody. And after the service, went home, and I thought, it's just not for me. It's too much, I think, So next day when I went to work, I told Beth about that. I said, it was traditional, of course. And she said, in a few weeks, we are starting a brand new service. And she said, it's going to be called Serenity Worship. And she said, it's totally different. It's in like an intimate atmosphere. We'll be sitting in a circle, and Pastor Steve will do his sermon. And there's feedback from, the people and Pastor Steve. And the music is just totally different. She said it's much more, I would use the word relaxing and calming. And so I tried it the first Sunday. And I don't think I missed a Sunday after that. Talk about being drawn into something. And so through that, of course, I met Lori. I met Rose and my friend Eleanor, and just met some wonderful people. And it was just so nice. It was so relaxing. And the people that came in, they were, we had a couple of, people that were regulars, but a lot of times it changed. I mean, we were right next door to Halifax Urban Ministries. So sometimes, the homeless people would come in. And I loved that. And I loved the back and forth that you could ask questions during the sermon and all. And it was the place for me. So that was late, I think, in 96. And Easter Day on 1997, I was baptized at Serenity Worship. And it was just the greatest experience of my life to be in that worship service. And, you know, all things come to an end. I mean, that church ended up closing, and you know, the woman I was friends with, the minister of pastoral care, she went on to go to seminary. And when she came out of seminary, she was appointed up in Bunnell. And so Brenda went to Bunnell, lives in Ormond, went to Bunnell every Sunday for 12 years, maybe, something like that. And I just can't say enough about the people. And now I see God set that all up. I told Beth, I said, sometimes I think God and Jesus are up in heaven playing chess and, you know, let's move this person over here and this person over here. And I just think that they have it all figured out. And I can't tell you how grateful I am for that particular service, because without that, I probably would not have gone back. So I'm happy for you all that you have this opportunity to experience a new service. And I think it's going to be somewhat similar from what I understand. And here's the one thought I'll leave you with. There are some people, including me, who would never on their own walk into a church on a Sunday. It was all about the connections and the friendships that I made and the people that reached out to me. So I'm sure you all are wonderful at that, reaching out to people. It means so much. And like I said, it certainly transformed my life, and I'm ever so grateful for that. Thank you.